The sun beat down like a branding iron on the dry dirt of Buzzard Creek, Texas, a town where even time moved slow and secrets clung to the wind like red dust on denim. The annual spring auction was underway at the Cattleman's yard, an old wooden arena that smelled of tobacco, horse sweat, and fried cornbread. Men with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands leaned on rails, squinting from under wide-brimmed hats. Deals were made with head nods, not handshakes. But the moment Lot 39 limped into the ring, the murmurs faded and silence took over. The horse's name was Brimstone Dust, but everyone just called him Dusty. He wasn't old, maybe 7 years, but he walked like a ghost from another life. His chestnut coat shimmered under the sun, but all eyes were drawn to the grotesque swelling on his front right leg. A raw, reddish lump throbbed just above the hoof, a tumor, maybe worse. Dusty limped, but there was something stubborn in his eyes, like he still believed he belonged in the ring. The crowd, however, had already turned away. "Ain't nobody dumb enough to bid on that," someone muttered near the fence. No one disagreed. His owner, Clovis Big Clove Remington, stood silently beside the gate, hat low, boots planted like roots in the ground. A rancher through and through, Clovis had buried 2 wives, 3 dogs, and more dreams than he cared to count. Dusty was the last good thing left from the Remington ranch, born the same week Clovis's youngest son enlisted. And now the horse stood bruised and broken under the cruel eye of the auctioneer, like a memory waiting to be erased. "Lot 39, called out Billy Ray Glover, the fast-talking auctioneer with a gold tooth and a whiskey voice. "Chestnut stallion needs a little love and luck. We'll start at 100. He looked around. Nothing. Not a single paddle raised. Billy Ray coughed, adjusted his hat, and tried again. Still nothing. Even the wind stopped moving. Then, out of nowhere, a man stepped forward from the back row, slow, tall, and silent. His jeans were dusty, boots worn down, and his denim shirt clung to a wiry frame. His name whispered through the crowd like a ghost story. Elwood Doc McCrae, once the best damn horse doctor in all of Texas, until he vanished after a tragedy no one dared mention. Doc didn't speak. He just walked into the ring, dropped to one knee, and gently placed his hand on Dusty's injured leg. The crowd held its breath. Dusty flinched, then stood still. And then something shifted. Quietly. Unmistakably. Something no one there would forget. For a long second, no one moved. It was as if the entire crowd had forgotten how to breathe. Doc McCrae's hand remained on Dusty's leg, steady, firm, not like a veterinarian examining an injury, but more like a man reaching into a memory. The stallion didn't shy away. He stood frozen, eyes locked with Doc's, the tension in his muscles loosening, his breathing slowing. Dusty didn't flinch anymore. Something about that touch, that silent moment between man and beast, made the arena feel holy. "Is he calming down?" someone whispered. Another voice followed. "That's Doc McCrae, ain't it? Thought he left after that colt died on him." The crowd stirred with murmurs and old stories. Rumors had long followed Elwood McCrae like dust trails behind cattle. Stories about a promising career that collapsed overnight, about a surgery that went wrong, about a man who swore never to touch another horse again. But there he was, on one knee in the dirt, cradling Dusty's leg like it held the truth he'd buried years ago. Clovis Remington stepped forward slowly, confused and guarded. "Doc?" he said, more breath than voice. The last time he'd seen McCrae was 6 years ago, in the rain outside a burned-out barn. They'd said he walked away from medicine that night and never looked back. But now his hands were working again, gentle fingers pressing into tissue, checking for heat, swelling, bone alignment. His movements were slow, methodical, and full of something the crowd hadn't seen in a long time. Care. "I've seen this before," Doc muttered without looking up. "This ain't cancer. Not yet, anyway." He motioned toward the swelling. "It's an abscess. Deep and nasty. Probably from a stone bruise or a splinter that festered." but it can be drained. He's not finished. Not by a long shot. The arena erupted in low gasps and shifting boots. Clovis blinked, unsure if he was hearing hope or hallucination. "You serious?" he asked, voice cracking. Doc nodded, finally rising to his feet, dusting off his jeans with one hand, the other still stained from the infection. He looked Clovis in the eye, and for a second both men stood not as strangers, but as wounded souls tied to something bigger than pride. Billy Ray Glover leaned into the mic again. "Well, folks, sounds like we've got ourselves a second opinion. The bid still stands at 100. This time, 3 paddles went up, then 4, then 6, and in the middle of it all, Dusty took one solid step forward, without limping. That night, after the auction crowd had scattered and the dust settled over the empty arena, Doc McCrae stood alone near the holding pens. The scent of hay and iodine filled the cooling air. Brimstone Dust was in the far stall, finally resting. The swelling had been drained partially, and the horse was already putting more weight on his leg. It wasn't a miracle. It was muscle memory, the kind that never really fades, no matter how long you stay gone. Clovis Remington leaned on the rail a few feet away, watching the old vet work like time had folded in on itself. "Didn't think I'd ever see you with a horse again," he said quietly. Doc didn't answer at first. He just kept moving, checking Dusty's eyes, rinsing the drained wound, adjusting the leg wrap with practiced hands. "I didn't come here to fix anything," Doc finally muttered. "I was just passing through." But they both knew that was a lie. Buzzard Creek wasn't the kind of place you ended up in by accident. Truth was, Doc had seen Dusty from the edge of the stands and felt something uncoil inside him. Something tight and buried, something he thought he'd sealed shut the night his own horse bled out in his arms. That horse's name was Ember Jack, a wild, fire-blooded stallion he'd raised from a colt. The autopsy later showed a twisted gut, something Doc had missed in time. He blamed himself. The owners blamed him louder. The town whispered until the whispers turned to silence. And Doc walked out just like that. No goodbye. Just grief. "I never meant to be anyone's hero," he said suddenly, as if reading Clovis's thoughts. "I just knew how to listen to animals better than people." Clovis nodded slowly, watching him. "Well, that horse listened to you. That's more than most folks around here manage anymore." They both chuckled softly, the sound awkward and painful, like laughter dug out of dry ground. As they stood there, the heavy wooden gate creaked open. It was Billy Ray Glover, the auctioneer, holding a clipboard and chewing on a toothpick like it was a cigar. "You should know," he said, tilting his hat back. "Dusty sold. Buyers from Marfa. Runs a rehab ranch for injured rodeo stock. But he ain't talking him just yet. He's asking if you'd stay a few days. Help with the healing." Doc didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to Dusty, lying quietly now, eyes half closed but peaceful. And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in the horse, but in the man. The kind of shift that says, "You're not done yet." The morning came quiet and dry, with a layer of golden haze clinging to the horizon like old regret. Doc McCrae hadn't slept much. He'd spent the night in the small bunkhouse behind the auction yard, where the walls still smelled like mildew and cheap bourbon. His dreams had been scattered and sharp, flashes of Ember Jack collapsing in slow motion, the screams, the stillness. By dawn, Doc was already up, standing outside Dusty's stall, watching the stallion breathe. Brimstone Dust was healing faster than expected. The swelling had gone down significantly overnight. He moved cautiously, but the limp was now more habit than pain. Doc checked the wraps, cleaned the leg again, and gave the horse a slice of apple, the same way he used to with Ember Jack. The gesture made his throat tighten. Some routines never left your bones, even when you tried to forget them. Billy Ray stopped by again just after sunup. He had coffee in one hand and the same damn toothpick in the other. "The folks from Marf'll be here tomorrow," he said. "Said if you're still around, they'd like to talk face to face. Might even offer you a job." Doc raised an eyebrow. "A job doing what?" "Patching up broken horses in the middle of nowhere." Billy Ray shrugged. "Hell, you patched one yesterday. That's more than you've done in 6 years. Doc didn't respond. Not right away. He just stared at the dust blowing across the arena, the same ground where he'd walked away from everything. "You know what they called me back then?" he finally asked. "The Horse Whisperer of West Texas. Like I had magic in my hands." He paused, his voice colder now. "But there's no magic in watching something die slow while you stand there holding a scalpel." Billy Ray didn't say much after that. Just gave a nod and left the coffee beside the fence. But Clovis showed up not long after, hat in hand, like a man visiting a grave. "I didn't get a chance to thank you proper," he said. "You gave Dusty a second shot. And maybe gave one to yourself, too." Doc looked at him hard. "I didn't come here to heal myself, Clove. I came here to disappear." Clovis stepped closer. "Maybe. But some things don't let you disappear. They find you. Especially the things you love, and the ones you ran from." Doc said nothing. But deep inside, something stirred, not anger, not fear. Something quieter. Like hope, trying to remember the way back home. The drive to Marfa was long, flat, and quiet, the kind of silence that made you hear your own guilt. Doc McCrae hadn't been that far west in nearly a decade. As he crossed the long stretches of sun-scorched highway, memories came without warning. Ember Jack running wild across a pasture at sunset, the shouting match outside the vet clinic, the door slamming shut behind him. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, like it could hold back everything coming up from beneath the surface. The rancho was nothing like he imagined. Called Silver Mercy, it was tucked behind a dry ridge, surrounded by fencing and open skies. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, cared for. You could tell it was built with intention. Horses moved slowly in open paddocks, some with bandaged legs, others with cloudy eyes. It wasn't just a holding place, it was a sanctuary. Doc stepped out of his truck, the heat hitting his back like a punishment. Dusty was there, already unloaded, standing calm near a shaded corral. A woman stepped out from the barn, strong, sharp-featured, and wearing a wide straw hat pulled low over her eyes. She walked with a limp, slight but noticeable. As she got closer, Doc's heart skipped. Lena Joy Callahan. He hadn't heard that name in years. Hadn't seen her since the hearing. She'd been the assistant vet who worked under him, loyal, brilliant, and the one who testified that he hadn't noticed the internal bleeding in Ember Jack in time. Her words had been clinical, not cruel, but they'd shattered him just the same. "I didn't know it was your ranch," Doc said flatly. Lena didn't flinch. "Didn't think you'd show up at all." She paused, eyes flicking to Dusty. "But I'm glad you did. The horse matters more than our history." There was steel in her tone, but no venom. Just distance. Time had carved its lines in her face too, and Doc wasn't sure if what he felt was anger, shame, or something between the two. They stood in silence for a beat, the kind that holds too much truth to speak. Then she nodded toward the barn. "You want to see the others? I've got 3 more cases worse than Dusty. Might be good to have another set of hands, if yours still remember how to work without running." Doc hesitated, eyes on the sun-faded horizon. He could leave now, drive away again. But something in him refused to move. Instead, he followed her. The barn at Silver Mercy smelled of liniment, sawdust, and old wounds. It was long, dimly lit, and quiet, not the kind of quiet that came from emptiness, but the kind built on pain being held in check. As Doc McCrae walked down the aisle, he passed stalls with horses in various states of recovery. legs wrapped, ribs showing, some too tired to lift their heads. He recognized the signs: trauma, neglect, sometimes just bad luck. But what hit him hardest wasn't what he saw. It was what he felt, the undeniable truth that he used to care like this, before he stopped. Lena Joy moved ahead of him, naming each horse as she passed. That one's Copper Joe, Shattered Pastern, next's Lil Smoke, rescue from an illegal race circuit, and here's Junebug, found her so bad she couldn't stand last month. Her voice was calm, but not cold. There was a kind of weight in the way she spoke, not just responsibility, but grief. Every name meant something to her. Every injury was personal. They stopped at the last stall. Inside was a young mare with a deep gash running down her shoulder. The sutures were recent, but clumsy. Came in from another rescue. Volunteer tried to stitch her without anesthetic, Lena muttered. Her fists clenched unconsciously. She still won't let me touch her. Doc knelt slowly, careful not to make a sound. The mare tensed, eyes wide, breath sharp. But he didn't reach out. He just sat there, still as stone. "I remember when you used to do that," Lena said behind him. "Sit and wait. No touching. No pressure. Just presence. That's what made you great, you know. It wasn't your hands. It was your patience." Doc didn't turn around. "And I lost it," he replied. "Patience, instinct, whatever it was. I let Ember Jack die." The mare's ears flicked at his voice, but she didn't bolt. Lena leaned against the stall. "You didn't let him die, document. You made a mistake. I testified because I had to, not because I wanted to watch you burn." Her voice cracked at the edges. "You left. I stayed. And I've spent every year since trying to fix what neither of us could control." Doc finally looked up at her, really looked, and saw not accusation, but exhaustion. Maybe even understanding. The mare took one slow step forward, then another, until her head hovered inches from Doc's shoulder. He didn't flinch. Neither did she. For a brief second, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was healing. That night, a dry wind swept across the hills outside Silver Mercy, whistling through the cracks in the barn walls like a song nobody wanted to hear. Doc McCrae sat alone on the feed-room steps, staring into a chipped enamel mug of black coffee gone cold. His hands, rough and steady just hours ago, now trembled slightly. The day had taken more from him than he'd expected, not because of the horses, but because of her. Lena Joy. The words she'd spoken kept ringing in his ears. She found him there just past midnight, her boots soft on the hay-dusted floor. "I lied," she said simply. No preamble. No apology. Just the sharp edge of a truth finally ready to cut. Doc looked up slowly. His face didn't show surprise, only weariness. "About what?" he asked, already knowing. "About Ember Jack," she said. Her voice was hoarse, like it had to push the words through years of silence. "The autopsy. It wasn't your fault. The twist in his gut, it was congenital. You couldn't have known. No one could have." Doc's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. "Not yet." Lena stepped closer. "I didn't tell you because I thought if you walked away, you'd finally stop punishing yourself. But I see now, you weren't walking away. You were drowning." The barn creaked around them, as if holding its breath. Doc set the mug down and stood slowly. His eyes were darker than usual, not with anger, with disbelief. "You let me believe I killed him." His voice was low, brittle. "You stood there on that stand and watched me fall apart." Lena swallowed hard. "I thought I was protecting you from something worse, from the guilt you already carried. But I was wrong. I didn't save you. I buried you." For a long moment, the only sound was the slow shifting of a restless horse in the next stall. Doc turned his back to her, hands resting on the wooden beam. His breath was ragged, shallow. "Do you know what it's like to look at your own hands and see nothing but failure?" he whispered. "I gave up everything because I thought I deserved it." Lena stepped beside him, quiet but firm. "Then take something back." She nodded toward the barn, to Dusty, to the mare, to every broken animal still breathing. "They're still here. You're still here. Don't waste the second chance they'll never get." Doc closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel it all. The next morning came without mercy, dry, bright, and already hot before the sun fully rose. Doc McCrae stood at the edge of the corral, boots sunk in the loose dirt, watching Brimstone dust trot in slow, careful circles. The limp was nearly gone. Muscle memory had returned, along with something else, presence. The horse no longer carried the same weight in his eyes, and neither did document. But that didn't mean the weight was gone. It had only shifted, from guilt to decision. Inside the barn, the other horses waited. Injured, yes, but not hopeless. Every breath they took was a kind of defiance. Lena worked silently, focused, her hands quick and deliberate. She hadn't spoken much since the night before. Neither had document words, they both knew, didn't fix everything. But they had torn things down before. Now, it was time to build something back up. One bandage, one truth, one stubborn heartbeat at a time. Clovis Remington showed up mid-morning, leaning against the fence like he belonged there. He tipped his hat, squinting at Dusty. "He's got fire again," Clovis said. "Just needed someone to believe he wasn't done yet." Doc nodded slowly. "Maybe we all did." There was no judgment in his tone, just clarity. 4 years, he'd carried the belief that he wasn't worthy of redemption. That belief was a wound deeper than anything Dusty had ever suffered. But now, for the first time in a long time, it was starting to close. Later that day, Lena handed Doc a folded paper. It was a job offer, official, simple, and final. "We need someone full-time. Someone who understands more than just bones and blood. Someone who knows what it means to be broken and still show up." Doc held the paper like it might burn. His first instinct was to say no. He was good at leaving. He'd turned it into a survival skill. But this time, the road wasn't calling. The horses were. He walked to Dusty's stall before giving any answer. The horse met his eyes with quiet strength. No fear, no pain. Just a kind of trust that was earned, not given. Doc ran a hand down Dusty's neck, his voice barely above a whisper. "You showed up for me. Maybe it's time I do the same." When he walked back to Lena, the paper was still in his hand. But the hesitation was gone. It had been 3 weeks since Doc McCrae decided to stay. Not permanently, not yet. But long enough for the barn cats to stop scattering when they saw him, and for the horses to recognize his footsteps before they heard his voice. The rhythm of the Silver Mercy Ranch had a way of seeping into a person's bones, slow, steady, demanding in all the right ways. Doc found comfort in the repetition, cleaning wounds, wrapping legs, mixing feed, whispering to animals who no longer trusted humans. He didn't need to talk much. Here, silence was understood. Brimstone dust was now running, not fast, not wild, but with purpose. The limp had faded to memory, and with it, something in Doc had softened. He watched the horse move across the corral in the golden light of dusk, tail flicking, hooves light. It wasn't just a recovery. It was proof. Proof that healing wasn't always about being fixed. Sometimes it was just about learning to live again. Scarred, sure, but not broken. Inside the barn, Lena Joy Callahan worked beside him like they'd never been apart. The silence between them had changed, too. It was no longer made of old wounds, but of mutual understanding. There were still things unsaid, things that might never be spoken, but they didn't need to be. Doc could feel the shift in how she looked at him now. Not with blame. Not with distance. But with quiet respect, and maybe something more, waiting patiently beneath the surface. One night, after the stalls were clean and the horses fed, Lena handed Doc a faded photograph. It showed a young amberjack, wild-eyed and proud, with Doc standing beside him, back when his hands still believed they could save anything. "I found this in an old folder," she said. "Thought you should have it." He stared at the photo for a long time, not smiling, but not flinching either. "I remember that day," he said. "He'd just kicked a fence post clean in half." Lena laughed, soft and real. "You told me that meant he was ready to trust again." Trust. That was the word Doc hadn't dared to use. Not for himself, and not for this place. But it was blooming around him now, slow and cautious. The horses trusted him. Lena did too, in her own way. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to trust himself again. The next morning, a letter arrived. No name on the envelope. Just one word scribbled on the outside: closure. The envelope felt heavier than paper. Doc McCrae turned it over in his hands a dozen times before finally sliding his thumb beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet, typewritten, with a signature at the bottom that made his chest tighten. Dr. Silas Harmon, the veterinarian who had conducted Ember Jack's final post-mortem report. Doc hadn't seen that name in years. The letter was dated 6 months ago, delayed, maybe lost in transit, or maybe it arrived when it was meant to. "We reviewed your case again during an ethics audit. The results of the final report were misfiled. Ember Jack's condition was genetic, not procedural. No one told you. They should have. I'm sorry." Doc stared at the words until they blurred. He sat on the porch of the bunkhouse as the sun cracked over the hills, the kind of sunrise that made the earth feel brand new. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just let the letter rest on his lap while the silence held him. Not to crush, but to cradle. Later that morning, Lena Joy found him feeding Brimstone Dust, who now nudged Doc's shoulder like a dog asking for attention. "You okay?" she asked, gently. Doc nodded. "Yeah. Just feels like I've been carrying around a ghost that wasn't mine." He held up the letter. She read it without speaking, then folded it carefully and handed it back. "That chapter's done," she said. "What matters now is the one you're still writing." They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. Work called, a new rescue arriving that afternoon. Another mare with a cracked hoof, scared and unpredictable. Lena gave Doc the intake form. "She's yours," she said. "I think you'll know what to do." He took the paper, looked at the name scribbled across the top. Whiskey Annie. A fighter's name. That evening, Doc stood at the center of the pasture, watching the horses roam. Dusty grazed freely now, no limp in sight. The breeze was warm, the air thick with summer and second chances. For the first time in years, Doc didn't feel like he was waiting for something to go wrong. He wasn't running, hiding, or surviving. He was simply there. And as the sun dipped behind the ridge, casting long golden shadows across the land, Doc McCrae smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because, finally, it didn't have to be.